the OTA YouTube, just so that for those that aren't able to attend, they can still get the content later. Thank you. Okay. Now it's all you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking some time to be here. Before I start, I guess I'll just say my name is Troy Henry. I am a pre-college trio advisor who works on both the Educational Talent Search and Upward Bound grant out of Clatsop Community College in Astoria. I think this is my 7th or 8th year of doing this. And along the way, one of my favorite parts of working with pre-college trio students, and arguably one of the things I've been most successful with, is getting the student scholarships, helping them identify scholarships, apply for those scholarships, and use those scholarships. So if any of you are working at the TRIO SSS level or beyond, hopefully there'll be some relevance here, but today I will be focusing on how I work with mostly high school seniors, but pre-college TRIO students to that end. Great. So please feel free to interject if there are any questions. It's been a while since I've used Zoom, so if I miss anything, Robin, are you going to be on for the duration?
Yes, I'll be on, and I will help monitor the chat if anything comes up on the chat, and can help if any share issues come up with share screen, but you got this. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. I am totally fine with interjections and questions and interruptions because something great might come out of it. You never know. All right. Okay. So one of the first and most important things, I'll just to give you a little roadmap of the agenda I'm going to go through. So I'm going to talk about laying the groundwork, targeting scholarships, questions of eligibility, sort of the ask, like, that'll be more clear when we get to it. The importance of scholarship essays and letters of recommendations, interviews when and if, and how to support students in preparing for those. And then some notes on the strategy of using the scholarships, follow-up, and then even kind of connected to that is like if they strike out, sort of helping them keep their spirits up and on their radar that they will have another possibility down the road and help them prepare them for that. And then what I really want to make sure I have time for, so at least the last 20 minutes of the call or so, is reviewing some of the big scholarships that are out there for students from Oregon, like the Ford Scholars, like the Hagen Scholarship, so on and so forth. So that's where we're going. All right. So like many things, having a solid foundation is pretty important up front. So I like to just get students familiar with, let's see, I think I might have to adjust how I share. No, that's right. The type of sharing I'm doing will show. So I created this template years ago, and I have a few different versions of it, but I like to get students familiar with this well in advance of their senior year. And this is an activities chart that actually they liked so much here at Warrenton High School, where I'm an advisor, that they actually use it for their local scholarship competition now. So it's really relevant for my students. But it's just a template. The format could change. But the important thing is I try to get students, without cheapening the meaning of community service and other things that they're doing to enrich their lives and give back to their communities, thinking about what they're going to be doing over the next several years in terms of how they can translate it to a resume to apply for scholarships. Whether or not they're actually submitting a resume, these are the sort of things, and I encourage them to make one of these and treat it as a living document, because there'll be a lot of things that they don't keep track of along the way. Like if they do concessions one night for a basketball game, that's community service. So they should keep track of it, because in the pressure of the deadline, era of their senior year, it might be hard to recall some of these things. And so I just try to get them thinking about whatever stage I start working with them at, where they might have any weak points. Do they have no co-curricular activities? Well, if that's the case, maybe they should join a club. Are you sharing currently that summary of the activities chart? Because all we see is your groundwork. Because I would love to see that, because that's a fantastic thank resource. You for that's why I love interjections. Thank you. Let's change how I'm sharing it. I thought I had it on the share. Let me see. So this doesn't happen again. Screens. Okay. Play this. All right, can you see it now?
That worked. You got it.
Okay, so much better. Thank you. All right, so yes, here it is. So, I get them to think about what kind of activities, like co-curricular activities they're involved in, whether that's through their school, could be outside of school, something like scouting, or maybe they're really involved in their church, or, like here we have a Consejo Hispano that serves the Latine community. Volunteer activity. One thing that I emphasize a lot with students here is some of my higher achievers who are part of our, demographic, majority demographic that we serve through TRIO, may not have as much volunteer activity, because they have been working a lot, because they're doing other co-curriculars, because they have a rigorous academic load. And so I help them a lot, first of all, in finding volunteer activities, but I try to help them understand a little bit the psychology of the way like a resume works. And the fact is, like, it's still just one line on this resume if they volunteer 10 hours per week at the library throughout high school. And it's also one, like, visually, the impact is about the same if they go and do 1 3-hour beach cleanup. Right. And so even though, like, a more rigorous committee would probably pick up on the difference between those two things, I try to point out to them that episodic volunteering opportunities are really golden for building their resume and giving them something to talk about, particularly if they're pressed for time. Anyway, employment is another section I have on here. Honors and awards. I think this could be changed or shortened, but this would be anything from perfect attendance to, here we have something like Warrior of the Month that recognizes students usually for like citizenship type things, effort. Could also be lettering in a sport, things like that. Projects, interests, and hobbies. This can be important depending on the ilk of the scholarship, but should be captured somewhere. If a student like builds their own computer from parts, or buys an old beat up Dodge Dart and restores it to function, or whatever their interests and hobbies might be, creates a mural. One thing that I have another version, depending on the scholarship, that also specifically has a leadership section, but usually that's kind of worked into these. It can also go with honors and awards. So there's, anyway, something like this to share and get them to think about this in advance. And then, of course, their education and career goals. And then all this really helps them just to have a template to mine from when they're feeling the stress of applications. They can look for a lot of the contents that they'll address in their scholarship essays from this activities chart. So this is kind of big in how I try to help them lay the groundwork for success. And if there are areas where they don't have much, like the co-curricular activities, I really try to push students in the direction of like Key Club, for example, because it's sort of a threefer. It's like a long-standing organization that has a great reputation and national recognition. It is a co-curricular activity, and if they need some leadership, they might, do some sort of a leadership role in the club. And also, it's dedicated to community service, so they don't have to go out and find their own community service. They can do some of that through the club, and then also be able to fill in that sort of community service aspect. Okay. I'm not super savvy with this, so I'm just gonna do the way that my grandfather would have. He wasn't around when there was Zoom, but anyway, back to, here we are. All right, excuse me for being clunky. Okay, so yeah, I really work with students there, along with emphasizing, the stuff that we all know, that grade point average and even standardized testing, stuff like that can all help them win a scholarship. I also think it's really important to get them to understand the financial realities of paying for college in different scenarios, and understanding that where a lot of them might be able to pay for tuition and fees, really, if they're not going to be able to do it by their own means, that's where scholarships come in terms of covering housing, food, and other non-direct expenses. So there are a few scholarships too that students can apply for as juniors. I'm going to try not to do this the clunky way. Did that change the view you all have, what I'm sharing?
No, it's showing your Word document.
Is there a setting I can change for that, Robin? Is that?
I think you just need to select to share, and then when you have the option to share, you choose which screen or tab or window you're wanting to share. So you can't really flip between, like, do you have two screens going? There you go.
No.
Now it's on the scholarships you can apply for.
Yeah, I'm just a slightly well-dressed caveman over here. All right.
It's working
Okay.
great. You got it.
So here's a document that I've provided to my students. I think this looks like it's from this year, of some scholarships they can apply for as juniors. Now, I wouldn't say this Coolidge scholarship unless they're like a history buff. Yeah, it's not a great one. The Reach Your Peak scholarship, I learned about that through OTA, so you've probably seen about that.
Troy, it seems like maybe you froze. We'll just hold tight for a sec.
Poor guy, he's got some great stuff though.
Yeah, for sure. This is wonderful.
I know.
I'm gonna try stopping his video to see if that makes a difference, but it's not working. Well, how are you all doing while we wait for Troy's internet to come back?
Good. I'm actually reviewing scholarships as we do this.
Doing good. So we had 17 Ford finalists. We have 11 awarded.
Dang,
That is incredible.
bravo.
Thank you. It's not me, it's my staff, but I'm just amazed. It's fantastic.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's record breaking. I don't think we've ever done that many
Ooh.
in a year. Yeah. Like we
Yeah.
had 4 at one school at our Illinois Valley school, and all 4 of them got it.
Oh
It's
my
just-
gosh.
Yeah.
That's gonna give hope to students of the future.
Oh yeah.
Scholarships
Oh,
work.
yeah. They do. They do. So
I just know the process can feel so arduous, so it's nice to have those stats to be able to share moving forward.
well, and I'm looking at my whiteboard and I'm like, I have scholarship nights all month long. And I was like, this is the best time of the year, is just giving
Such a
away
good
money.
feeling, yeah.
You get some money and you
Yeah.
get some money. I was like, this is the closest I get to Oprah. I love it.
Exactly. Exactly. I know. That's how I was feeling at the conference.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. You get a prize and you get a prize.
Yeah.
Why didn't you give me a prize? Oh, wait.
Oh.
You gave
You
Project
didn't-
Youth Plus.
You didn't stick around.
I know. I wanted to. I wanted to.
Shane didn't make it either. Sad.
Not my turn this
Oh.
year. Next year.
That's kind of where it was for me. I was like, I go all the time. I gotta let other people experience the amazing trio conferences.
Yeah, Liz got to go. She was stoked. She really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Worked out well for her.
Yeah, my advisors loved it. So
Good. I had a really good time hanging out with them.
yeah,
Trying to get to know the pre-college world better.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
they're good. They're good ones. I'm excited for what they can do at Grants Pass. So
Yeah. I was hearing about the event of making the soda beverages with the additional
oh.
sugar added. That's all I took away from it. I was like, this is sugar on sugar.
And the
Horrible
kids loved
idea
it.
that they would
I
love.
know. The kids loved it. Well,
The
they
teachers
asked
are like,
them-
why would you do this to us?
I know, right? Well, it was kind of like that. That is the reward for something. I don't even remember what it was, or maybe it was like the
Just to
Ford
get them in the
scholarship
door.
is done.
Yeah.
So it's like, and they had like 7. How many did they had 7 students apply, and they had 6 of them be awarded.
That is
So
amazing.
they were busy little beavers over there getting stuff done. So it
That's
was one
awesome.
way for them to just kind of let their kids breathe before the next round, because they have a bunch doing Renaissance now for the second round. So we'll
That is
see.
great.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have any tips or tricks for how you prepare the students for the interviews? Because all I do is
Yes.
have them look at the past YouTube ones, which are pretty dry and tough to watch, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, here's we have an ace in the hole, Jan Taylor. She's been doing it for years, but this is what she does is she gives them that financial outline of what they have and what they know. So if they're getting full Pell Grant and so we
Oh,
just kind of break down the cost, because most times Ford wants to know, well, what is going to be your need? The other thing is she develops questions based off of their essays that they've written. And with those questions, they do like a mock interview with them to get them prepared so they don't feel so awkward going in and having to talk about themselves. So they're kind of like, let's dig deeper on this aspect. This was a compelling essay. These pieces stood out to us. Tell us a little bit more about that. That way they get to know that student. A lot of
Okay.
times those interviews are more of a conversation, but the conversation is led by their essays.
Okay.
They also like to see that students have some work experience, like they are out working. So I would encourage students that want to go to a 4-year university and want to apply for board to get some, get out there and work.
I
Along
didn't know that.
with, yeah, they like those kids that are working hard in school and out of school. And so the community service is important. I think they've said like if you have 3 under each category of community, employment, and school, then it's a good indicator that you're more of a well-rounded student. And then also having them dress more professional,
Okay.
even though it's on Zoom, just more of a
Okay.
business professional look,
Okay.
leaves a better impression. But yeah,
Cool.
they go through this whole like mock interview process, talk about their financials so that they can easily discuss, well, this is what my financial need will be after my Pell Grant, and after my FAFSA, because obviously there has to be some sort of a need. And
Yeah.
then, with those, I have been like, I had some students that, we had some students that got beat the odds, or they also got Renaissance. And so they know that those awards are there. But they go through it all, kind of do that
Okay.
financial piece with them to help them really be able to communicate with that. Sorry, Troy, your turn.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Welcome back. No worries.
Yeah.
We're good. We've just
I
been
don't know what happened.
keeping the conversation alive here.
I'm glad that you all are still here.
Yeah.
Okay, let me go back to where I was. Hopefully it's not this document. All right. Well, long story short, the Horatio Alger Scholarship is my preferred one to work with students on their junior year. And that's for a number of reasons. I really like that it has, first of all, it's a pretty gentle timeline. I think I have March 1st here, but I think it was actually March 15th was the deadline. And it has the one thing that's pretty difficult about it for Oregon, at least our neck of Oregon, is that the income restriction is pretty acute. I have contacted them, and I think you can even find in the FAQs, it's not cut and dry, but it's pretty low. But there are some big scholarships out there of national scale that have a really low income cutoff. This works for some students, not for all, but for the ones it does work for, it's a really, if you all are familiar with Horatio Alger's stories, it's the whole like overcoming obstacles, rags to riches, ambitions type of thing. And it works really well. It translates very well to a lot of the scholarships that I have them apply for, usually their senior year. So like whether that's Ford or Beat the Odds or a lot of the ones that you're probably familiar with. So I sort of tell them that even if they don't win one of the $10,000 state scholarships or one of the $25,000 national scholarships as a junior, it won't be time wasted, because this will basically build that muscle ahead of when the real scholarship season comes about. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? I took off my Bluetooth in case that's what overwhelmed the system. I don't. Right. Great. All right, so. Sorry, I closed all my apps as well. Must have been my computer. It's moving really slowly.
Well, we can also have you go off video if you're feeling like the internet level is unstable, if it feels like it's too much of a pull.
It's not a bad idea.
Okay.
Yeah, let me see. I think I'll give this one more try. If it gets shaky or whatever, I'll take. It's a good point. What's going on? Sorry, folks. All right, back on track. So yeah, laying a good strong ground, foundation is really important. Hopefully, going into our senior year, if everything's breaking right, particularly for Upward Bound, because I have a smaller caseload of students, we've identified not only like several scholarships that they could apply for going into it, but they've also identified who their key recommenders would be, so to whom they could go for getting a letter of recommendation. And I usually have them ask, again, everything, ideally, before summer break starts, asking those potential recommenders if they would write them a strong letter of recommendation specifically. And if anybody, waffles at all, then we should look for something else, because they're like, yeah, I'll write you one. And, if they don't sort of indicate through body language or tone or otherwise that it would be a good one, then it's probably important to find somebody else. So the next big thing, I think this is, I'll magnify this a little because this is kind of core to my philosophy. I try to have the students understand targeting and why that's really important. On one hand, scholarships is sort of a numbers game. The more scholarships that students apply to for which they're technically eligible, the better their chances of getting a lot of scholarship money. But in reality, there are limits on time, energy, and it's very disheartening for students to strike out on their first like 10 scholarship applications. So I try to make sure that going into their senior year, they're kind of clear on what the low-lying fruit is. And this is kind of how I define it for our context. So in this community, Warrenton High School, along with like Astoria High School, Seaside High School, all the local communities and high schools do a wonderful job supporting students with local scholarships. I know that's not the case everywhere, but here, I always sort of remind them of that above. If all those fails, you should be applying for those local scholarships. The second sort of batch of scholarships that are high priority, where they're the most likely to get scholarship money, is through the specific colleges and universities they're applying to. Of course, there's the automatic ones that just are awarded with admission. I'm not really, those are great. And that's part of the calculation, the conversation, and can boost their spirits, like when they win the Finley Academic Scholarship at OSU, for example. But I'm talking about the internal scholarship processes through those schools. So like at OSU, it would be Scholar Dollars. And then the third is niche scholarships. And some students have more access to niche scholarships than others. Like, this year I had a senior who was a prototypical TRIO student who was also
Latina who is going into engineering and is athletic, and she had a lot of different niches that we could look at. And so kind of that's a sort of a one-on-one conversation a little bit, getting them to kind of realize what the niches they have might be. There are some scholarships out there that are very niche, and a lot of years I may not have a student who qualifies, but this year one of my seniors won the Evans Scholarship at U of O, which is fantastic because that's very niche. They have to have, I forget, it's a strong GPA, have high financial need, and have worked as a golf caddy and want to continue to golf when they're at U of O. And I had that student, and he won, and it's a full ride. So that's fantastic. Definitely worth kind of sorting those things out. In the rare, I mean, I drew this as a Venn diagram. It's not always going to be the case, but needless to say, if there ever was, an overlap where it's local, it's niche, and it's for a specific college or university that they're applying to, that's like clearly the top priority. So yeah, I think that's what I want to say about that. And I just try to help the students. Like it is a little bit of a process of triaging depending how the student's senior year is going. We might have to come back to that and sort of reprioritize a couple times. But I try to have them going into sort of the scholarship season very aware of like which ones are the absolute priorities and which ones are kind of second tier and which ones are really whimsical or totally optional. And they always think that they'll apply for all of them. Well, depends on the student. But like they almost never do because it gets crazy, as you all know. Yeah, so part of that conversation of identifying and targeting too is related to eligibility. This may be really basic, but one of the reasons that it's so important for seniors to apply for FAFSA or ORSA as early as possible is so they know whether or not they're, need-based grant eligible. Usually Pell eligibility is used as a metric if they don't specify a specific income threshold for scholarship eligibility. And where that's not possible, then there's great FAFSA like forecasting tools and Pell Grant estimator tools out there that I try to have students do to determine their eligibility. And it's just something that I emphasize a lot. I've had too many students over the years launch in and start pouring efforts into a scholarship. And when they finally meet with me to look at it, we realize like, you're not eligible for that scholarship and you've just wasted a day of your time, which is sad. So we try to avoid that. Okay, so I kind of cringe on, I probably should find, so if I'm going to share this, that's too much like the art of the deal, and that makes all of our stomachs turn at this point. So whatever we want to call it, the task of the ask, there we go. The ask, by what I mean about that is helping the student kind of have a philosophical lens in approaching their scholarship applications. So first of all, like knowing the ilk or the orientation of the organization. There are some organizations like, so here, I feel like this is so not interactive. It's not my style here. Let me see. Raise of hands using your tool there, or if you want to come off camera. Who has ever supported a student through the Hagen Scholarship? Let's see. Nobody? Oh, okay. All right. Well, this will be breaking news. We'll definitely talk about it. The Hagen. Okay, Hagen's a good example of this. So I've learned over the years, and you can scour the website of a particular scholarship and learn a lot about the mission of the organization, what the scholarship is set up to achieve, what their priorities are, what their values are. The Hagen Scholarship, which if it's not on your radar, write that down and check it out. It's it's very laborious. It's a lot of things, but it's also very generous. It's $15,000 a year. And the students who are getting it are also going to basically be, if not getting like full Pell, near it. And they provide, in addition to $15,000 a year, if the student keeps their GPA up in college to a reasonable level, they'll pay for like a study abroad program. Starting their sophomore year, they'll start to invest in a Schwab investment portfolio for students. and teach them how to create a portfolio of stocks and bonds, which I know in this climate, yeah, that'll be interesting. Anyway, in normal times, it's just a wonderful life skill for the students to have. And if they play their cards right, they can graduate with over $20,000 in this Schwab investment portfolio in their name, which, I mean, theoretically, they could cash out and like use for medical school or something. Or what I usually do with the students to get them really excited about it is, you know, I'll go on and we'll find some interest projection scenarios where, okay, like if you just didn't touch it and it performs at, you know, it's average for Schwab investment portfolios, 9% per year. If they sit on it and retire at 70, they could have $1.7 million. But if they, you know, add just $500 a year on average, they can have $2.5 million. Anyway, so it's really exciting. It's a big scholarship. It's very, very involved. It's very straightforward in that one. The great thing about it, though, is if students jump through all the hoops that they present there, in my experience, if they are eligible and they jump through all the hoops, they get it. And I've had a lot of students win it over the years. I've also had a lot of students lose it when in college, and that's something we can touch on later. But anyway, all this comes back to like knowing the organization. And one of the ways that we can really support students as advisors is sort of building up our understanding of these organizations. And if, you know, if you're working with, if you're new at this, or if you're working on a scholarship that you're not familiar with, reaching out to your network, the OTA network, or even just your own counterparts, and finding out, you know, getting kind of the lay of the land from someone who's worked with different scholarships is great. But even just like our adult skills of kind of like figuring out what, you know, what the professed and maybe hidden values of an organization are is really important. So for Ford Scholars, one that I'm sure we're all familiar with, clearly, like, you know, the whole organization, Ford Family Foundation, is dedicated to the resilience of rural Oregon communities. And so I really, you know, that translates to like threaded throughout the students' essays for that scholarship, they should be mentioning, you know, their relationship to their community. And, you know, even if it's a little bit faking till they make it, at least opening the possibility that they want to give back to their community, come back to a small community like the one they grew up in, and be a role model for others. And that's been pretty successful. I also try to help students in understanding the fundamental task of being part of a scholarship committee, which I have been, which is really useful in serving them. And if you have the chance, you might do that as well to kind of be able to better serve students. It's helping them understand both the logistics of what a scholarship committee is going to be going through, of like how many applicants they'll have, like, you know, why their essays need to be pithy and things need to really jump out because they're going to be reviewing like 20 of them, you know, but also like understanding that the task philosophically at hand is that like scholarship committee members are asked to invest other people's money in, you know, to a certain end that they want to see. What's the end they want to see? They, you know, are they investing just in your success as a student? Are they investing in like knock-on social impact? Like they'd like to see, you know, rural communities, to go back to that example in Oregon, be served. And so helping them sort of understand that and helping them make themselves seem like a safe investment, like a safe bet. So sometimes what that means is things will look different for different scholarships. The Beat the Odds scholarship, with which, if you're not familiar with that one, that's another one to have on your radar. That one comes up really early. The biggest filter for the Beat the Odds scholarship, I think, for students who would be eligible is students not knowing about it and not applying in time. Usually it's like the second week of September is the deadline. I've had a lot of students win it over the years. That one, like the ilk of that scholarship is very much like they kind of want the trauma essay. You know, kind of they want students to kind of really speak to what their obstacles have been, what sort of traumatic circumstances they've been dealing with. And then there's other scholarships where, you know, it might be much more appropriate to have a lighter touch on the hardships, or even if you do, like helping students kind of smooth out their messaging around, you know, if they have mental health challenges, again, I encourage them, you want to make yourself a safe investment. There's a way to be authentic and communicate the same thing that's not as jagged as the student might put in their first draft. And of course, I think just, one of the best ways that we can support them as advisors is it's obviously in our social training to generally be humble. And clearly this is not a time to be humble. So I find myself in helping them with, both crafting their essays and editing them, kind of reminding them of what they've done, helping them see and sort of put words to some of their best qualities. And importantly, like conveying those in finding sort of that balance of like both humility and gratitude, as well as optimism and confidence. And usually striking that sort of tone will win them some scholarship money. I know I'm running a little short on time, due in no small part to the logistical issue earlier. I do just want to point out, this is a big one, dealing with weak points in an applicant's resume. This speaks to me a lot. This year I had, actually, I don't know, Shane, do you remember Marcos Gomez, perchance? Does that name ring a bell to you?
No, sorry.
I thought you might know him. Great kid, right? And definitely one of these students who, because of his level of commitment to his family, and by the way, I have his permission to talk about stuff like this. If any of you are starting to cringe, he's good with it. Because of his commitments to his family and because of how much he had to work, and because he doesn't actually live in this town, we have like no transportation to speak of here, and he doesn't have a car. It was really hard for him to do community service. Fortunately, we got some, or participate in things where he would have a leadership role. And so, the Gates Scholarship, which there again, if you're compiling a list here, that's one to have. It's for high performers. It's a full ride scholarship. It's yes, Melinda Gates, I think, runs the foundation. So from Bill and Melinda Gates originally. Fantastic scholarship opportunity. I believe that one is specifically for students from like ethnic and racial minority identities. But it very much emphasizes leadership. And that was a big weakness for Marcos. So we had a couple of sessions where we really like thought outside the box and prepared for, not only for in the essays, but that one has an interview, as many of the big scholarships do, how he would address it when he's asked about leadership. And basically, in his case, legitimately, authentically, Marcos has been a leader in his family. And we talked about that. He's been a leader through his job. And so we talked about how he was manifestly a leader in his work and also in the classroom in a very unofficial way. And it worked. And he got the full ride Gates Scholarship. So that's important too. Okay, I'm going to kind of zip through this. I'll share this. I'll polish it up and share it with everybody who's on the call afterwards. So don't feel shortchanged. But if it isn't already clear, like a lot of who wins scholarships generally comes down to letters of recommendation and essays. If students, there's always going to be kind of like a competitive edge. There's different, some scholarships are more holistic than others. But generally speaking, if a student's going to compete for a scholarship, they're going to have similar classes, similar GPA, similar activities to the other applicants. So what's the difference? The difference is the letters of recommendation and the essays. I, as an advisor, help students a lot with their essays in the construction and editing. They can help their recommenders a lot to write a strong letter of recommendation. Some of these best practices are probably pretty obvious, giving, at least 2 weeks advance notice. That's a minimum, maybe more. And making it easy for the recommender by providing, going back to that activity summary that I've had them working on, provide that to them. Be a little didactic, write down a few bullet points of like, I'd love it if you could emphasize X, Y, and Z in your letter, if you're comfortable. Giving them a copy of your transcript, and also maybe a printout about the scholarship if it's a particular especially if it's like very peculiar or unusual, that scholarship. And then I usually try to get my students to request at least one more letter of recommendation than they need. Sometimes those are by category. If it asks for 2 teacher letters of recommendation, I ask for them to get 3. And in the situations where they can see them, we look at them together and decide which ones are the strongest, and they submit those. Yada, yada, yada. I did see a couple things come up in the chat earlier. Should we look at that? Are there some, let's see.
I've been putting the links of the scholarships you've been mentioning in there, so that's what some of that is.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then Chrissy had given some feedback that these are excellent resources, and then Ginger had asked if you would be able to share your document. So,
For sure.
and the
Gladly.
template as well.
100%. Okay, well, we have 15 minutes left, and I guess I kind of, my instinct is to move in and talk about some of the specific big scholarships, but I don't really know where this group's at. I could also continue on with what I was doing. Next on the agenda is talking about scholarship interviews, but I'm happy to share those prep resources too. But we also could open this up to you all sharing more like you just were. I'm sure you know some great resources and tips and tricks as well. Does anyone want to speak to what you'd like to do with the last 15 minutes of the call? Yeah, some of the scholarships have on your radar, right on. Okay, if there are no other peeps.
I have a question actually.
Yeah, Chrissy.
So in providing like workshops or, letting students know about scholarships, like, just putting the word out there, what are some of the strategies that you've found that work really well? Because a lot of these are for juniors, such as like the Gates Scholarship. You really have to be thinking about college like well in advance to do this. And so what are some strategies that you've found to get students engaged in this and to actually put out that application?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so it depends. Again, I work, Chrissy, which program do you work with, or which?
So I work with True Talent Search. So with pre-college students, and right now my mind is towards our summer bridge programs for junior and senior students and how different those two programs might look for college bound versus juniors who are going into their senior year and just now applying to those sorts of scholarships.
Excellent. Yeah, that's good to know. So I work on both, Talent Search and Upward Bound grants, and like with Talent Search, I have students 6th through 12th grade, 150 students between 2 schools. With Upward Bound, I have like around 25 students in one school, 9th through 12th grade, mostly 10th and 11th. So it's really easy, and I kind of think I get to benefit a little because I kind of take the intensive work that I'm doing with Upward Bound, and then I sort of boil that down and repackage it and sort of parse it out for Talent Search. Talent Search can be tricky. I don't know how you all, I think the 80-20 rule is really big in TRIO advising work, where 80% of your time and energy goes into 20% of your caseload. That's kind of usually what I find again and again. I definitely find that with Talent Search and scholarships. So, I put together the resources, and I understand that I can't hook everyone. I can't be everything to everybody. But those students, the 20% who will take me up on it, will attend some. So I'll do a number of things. So we put together these portfolios for our juniors that this time of year, I'm meeting with small groups of juniors and sharing with them. And there are sections in here. We have sections on admissions, financial aid, and scholarships. And specifically, I'm going over with them, looking at those financial realities from the OSAC student budgets worksheet that you can find online through the Office of Student Access and Completion through the state. And it's got student budgets for all the different community colleges, public and private universities. We look at that, and then in the scholarship section, go through a lot of the things that I've been talking about here. And with the goal of there's in our packets, we've got kind of like a list of the scholarships so they can go into their senior year planning. That's pie in the sky. Again, only a certain percentage of students will actually pick that up, but that's one thing I do. What you can see on your screen now, obviously this is dated from a couple of years ago. This, I guess last year and this year, I've been breaking this up more, but at the beginning of their senior year, first week, I'm able to get into English classes and take the whole period. And this is one of the things that I emphasize with seniors is I just put together a very comprehensive list of important deadlines. Here I have kind of admissions in here too, and even some financial aid stuff. But mostly, if you go through this, it's scholarship oriented. Now, don't invest too heavily in the dates you see here because some of these have changed. I guess another thing I can show you is
I do just want to say this is an incredible list, and I'm very thankful that you put this together. It's awesome.
for sure. Yeah, unfortunately, these are, it's probably mostly accurate, but some do change. Anyway, there's I also like, you know, I kind of have affinity groups, and so like I go to, you know, there's a GSA club here, and so I go to the GSA club, and I have a whole package of LGBTQ plus scholarships that I'm, you know, going and presenting early in the year, and then later again. There's a multicultural student club here, so I'm going. Also, I work in a pretty small, it's like a 3 at high school, so you know, some years I might not have any like Asian Pacific Islander students. Other years I will, and I go to the multicultural club, you know, and also just present to students in different venues. I have like specific folders for different groups. Hispanic, Latina students, that's a big group here. So, you know, I'll specifically emphasize those scholarships, and that kind of speaks to like that niche angle. I find that with high schoolers, particularly busy seniors, you have to triangulate a lot. I use Remind, which isn't as good as it used to be, the free version. But if you're not familiar, it's basically a way that you can send out reminders, texts. Students can text you through Remind. Email, I do triangulate with email. I email everything out, but it's funny because like 5% of my students will mainly use email. 15% of them will mainly use, well, I don't know the percentages. A lot of them will mainly use text or whatever. I won't go, I don't Snapchat with students. I know some advisors do that. I draw the line there, but you know, I make myself pretty available, and I try to send out timely reminders. I think about when they'll be most responsive, when they'll be able to actually ingest these things. I try to, you know, I don't do it for everything, but I'll send things out. I also use Google Classroom. So that's something that a lot of the schools are using. And with the guidance counselor here, we have a College Bound Warriors, that's our mascot, site that we populate every year with students. You know, they can opt in or opt out. That's another place where I, again, kind of redundantly triangulate, like post these things, post reminders, post these links, descriptions. And I do offer workshops throughout the year, particularly right after winter break. And then we have our local scholarships competition, the deadline's right after their spring break. So I kind of generally will offer a couple. Usually when I do FAFSA workshops also, I'll have some, I'll touch on scholarships, even if it's just distributing information, but I'll make myself available during those times to help students with their scholarship applications. I hope that answers your question.
It absolutely does. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's just run through some of these. So what's up here? A few that I want to mention. So Beat the Odds is, I think I already mentioned that. That's a good one. I'd look into it. A lot of our students have high ACEs scores. We know that, you know, and a lot of students will feel really uncomfortable, sort of like, quote unquote, like pimping their trauma. And, you know, that's a whole like artful conversation to have with students, because one, the sort of trauma essay is re-traumatizing. So like, you know, I'm aware enough where I have some students, usually female students, women identifying, whatever, who, you know, I will pick up on that they're not as comfortable, you know, working on this one because it's really vulnerable. There's like a whole matrix of like all your traumas. And I'll work with our, you know, guidance counselor, Jamie Klebe, a woman who maybe is a more, comfortable place for them with that. But anyway, this one comes early and it's a great one. I forget offhand. I think I want to say like 6,000, 10,000, 6,000. It's a year. It's a big scholarship. The STAMP scholarship. This is offered through University of Oregon. There is a STAMPS Foundation that's national, and they offer it through a lot of other schools. They used to have like 3 or 4 West Coast schools when I started this job, and now it's just U of O. And I think there's some sort of matching arrangement from the school. It's constructed to be a full ride plus. It's like a full ride plus they have like a slush fund of like 12 grand where students could like take an unpaid internship and pay themselves out of the slush fund or study abroad in Italy or whatever they want to do. It's very high. It's like 3.85 unweighted cumulative GPA minimum. But what's great about this one, it has an early deadline. That's not what's great about it. But if a student applies for it, they're also simultaneously going to be applying for Clark Honors College at U of O and the Presidential Scholarship, which has a similar criteria. So it's not wasted effort. But the reason that one's key is that it's one of the rare full ride plus scholarships that doesn't rely on financial need. And I don't know how your projects operate, but we do have, a portion of our students who aren't low income, at least not at the time they're a senior and applying for these things. And so that's a good one. Jack Kent Cook, if you haven't heard of that one, I'd look into it. This one's really interesting. I've been learning more about it this year. They even have middle school level scholarships. It is for the creme de la creme. Like they have to be in the top 5% of their class, taking honors classes, essentially all A's and B's type of student, but it's a full ride plus, an incredible opportunity. The Hagen Scholarship I talked about before. Absolutely fantastic scholarship, had lots of students win it. The Dell Scholarship, like the Hagen and like the Gates, of course, comes with like a free laptop because it's Dell, like computers out of Texas. But it's a fantastic $5,000 a year scholarship, and it has a lower GPA threshold, and it's one of the ones where it's open to 11th and 12th graders. In my experience, I found that a lot of those, it's really hard for a junior to compete with their senior counterparts for those scholarships. But again, they can always reapply next year. It's great practice. There's a lot of LGBTQ plus scholarships out there. Point Foundation is specific to the Pacific Northwest. Is that right? No, Pride Foundation is specific to the Pacific Northwest, excuse me. And Point Foundation, I really like in that they have they have 3 separate scholarships. One is their flagship scholarship that's oriented towards whichever students, LGBTQ plus students who will be going to 4-year schools. They also have a separate community college scholarship, which is kind of rare and is a great opportunity. And then now they also, I think starting a couple years ago, they have a BIPOC scholarship specifically as well. So that's a great one. What else we have? The Al Forthan Scholarship, that's one that if it's not on your radar, it's Forthan, F-O-R-T-H-A-N, as in Neil, Nancy. And it's not AI, it's Al. It looks like AI because that's what we're all conditioned to see that as now. That one is specifically for students who themselves or in their family have been impacted by addiction, like substance abuse, drug and alcohol use. Last year they'd never done this before, but usually they just give one $10,000 scholarship and then like 50 other lesser awards. Last year they gave 2 of my seniors that $10,000 highest award. First time I've ever done that. It's totally gettable, great scholarship. Gosh, there's so much more to talk about. Ford, I'm assuming everybody's heard of Ford Scholars. If you haven't, look into Ford Family Foundation. These are tremendous scholarships. They're for Oregonians and Siskiyou County Californians, which is like Wairika, not many people there. And it's specifically for Oregonians who are going to go to school in Oregon, but it covers 90% of unmet need up to $40,000 a year. And it's been a fantastic one. I know that over 2/3 of their winners are TRIO students. If you're in a rural area, I think you have a better chance of getting that one. Oh yeah, Hagen, I forgot to mention earlier. Hagen is specifically, you have to be in a rural zip code or be from a rural area. And that's something, there are technical definitions of that online. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. Here's one that flies under the radar that I think is great. I've had students win, is the Oregon Diversity and Leadership Scholarship. This is, I think it's actually moved. This is old, so this is from a couple years old. You can find this on the Oregon College Savings Plan website. So the way that this scholarship works, unless this is another one of a very similar name, is they create, now it's more than this. Sorry, that's my daughter calling. And we're at time. Anyway, that's a great one to look into. They invest the money in Oregon College Savings Plan for students, and it's fantastic. I will send out a whole bunch of these for you all. I guess the last thing I would say is know like the local scholarships, kind of going back to that whole like Venn diagram, you know, with the targeting. The way that I try to get students to think about the niches that they qualify for is like kind of defining what I mean by niche. So like, okay, there's the Tall Club International Scholarship for exceptionally tall students. That's an odd niche. Yeah, there is. There's also one for people who are little people, but they have to be little people by that sort of definition. The smaller the niche, that wasn't supposed to piggyback on the little people thing. The smaller the niche that you're eligible for, the more likely you are to win that scholarship. So, you know, if a student comes to me like, oh, I found this scholarship, it's a national scholarship and I'm eligible, I'm going to apply for it. I say, okay, well, what else do you have on your radar? Because they're offering 10 scholarships. This organization's out of New York, and it's very generic. It's like 3.6 or better GPA, have to have some community service and some kind of leadership on your resume. That's a huge niche, right? If they had the same thing that was just for young women from the Pacific Northwest who are going into social sciences, that's a lot smaller niche. And that one is probably a better investment of their time. Anyway, speaking of investing time, thank you all for your time. I know I've run a little long due to various reasons, but thanks for being here. I hope that
This is fabulous. Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know if anyone has some final questions. I'm tempted to have you do a 2.0 since we didn't get all our time with you. So we could continue this conversation at another time if you're feeling like that would be helpful. But sharing all these resources will be endlessly helpful for TRIO students all across the state, and especially for the TRIO advisors that want to be able to support their students. So thank you so much.
For sure. I'll be happy to do that. What I can do is I can package some of these resources in like a shareable Google folder. Does that work? And
we have an OTA shared folder, so we could just put it in whatever you want to share into a shared folder and have that available to everybody.
Okay.
Or you could be the host of that shared folder, however you'd like to do it.
Well, if I was going to put something out there forever and ever and for everyone, I would need to pour more energy into polishing it up. But maybe we can talk offline.
Yeah, totally. Okay, I'm going to go ahead